I'm going to just pass these out.
Okay.
Is that okay? Oops,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Got it.
There's nothing up.
Fantastic.
What's this?
A lot of it has to do with the patience and but luckily I can detect the attitudes and actions of some of the parents and some of the patients. So you can always share how crazy some of the parents are. Some of the
I have tons of crazy. You really are. I was waiting.
Yeah, maybe a minute or two. There's still some folks missing.
Are you taping? Rough around.
It doesn't matter right now, but yeah. Not during the session, no faces.
Like I can like turn and go, Blue Jackets are #1! And like sneak around.
It's also not the office, so you can't like have a private interview during the middle of the When is Casey come back from Africa?
From Africa?
Is she doing this work for Africa?
No, she's coming home on May. I'm going to DC right
Go to PIS? All right.
Where is it?
That's the only meeting I get paid for. That's what do you think I tried to work on the council meeting?
Right.
I did go to concept pictures.
I'm not allowed to travel with my plane. I'm just kidding.
That will not surprise me.
Border Patrol.
That rings true. That checks out.
I'm going to be in DC during that time.
DC is
There's a hand mic over there that somebody can pass around. I think I'm going to use this, though. I know you could use it as another hand mic, but so that when questions are asked, they can stand away from the podium and get a little bit more
Absolutely, yeah,
engaged.
and we're going to have someone walking.
To walk that around. And if you feel you need this one for that, that's okay. But
And we're
Yeah,
still
just slip it on
missing
there
a
at
few
the top.
people, so we're going to wait a few minutes.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you. And Dr. Murray is going to introduce you to be. Okay. Maybe a few more minutes. We're still.
Yes.
You first thought we should that whenever you talk to that sort of slide.
She is. I go, so that makes her mad. I never said that. I said, He said, I'm trying to take care of your
I think someone else.
He does. When I told her to go to school most days because I'm not I give myself directions and he just makes sure the kids know. And that's part of his growing. He said, like, so I'm actually talking to her and you're laying on the couch, you're making sure that kids have medicine and have their shoes on. And then on the days that I don't go to work, I come back and they're kind of, yeah, so you're back in bed. I'm not out. Okay, great. Most of the time I do. And I know we're late on the couch playing on her phone and then what that So now I've solved the laundry crisis and first time, intervene.
How many?
5 cents. Right here. Talk to me about your
That's the question. Probably around 1:15.
Have another way to into the story. She's having a day, she's driving. She understands much. I understand where
I am done with the husband.
Henry Culver's in my network.
Trust me, I'm sure she'd like to reminisce and commiserate.
So she can't call her phone here. Okay, let me see if she's in that.
Okay, thank you. Should we send that information to
Okay, can you help me make sure I'm seeing correctly? I clicked on the link on the email. Feel free to
Is my link wrong?
Should I try a different browser?
What are you using?
Chrome.
That's Chrome?
Yeah. I have Firefox available. Oh yeah, there should be. Is our link exactly the same?
April 28, 2018 live stream.
Go ahead. Yeah. Come on. I clicked it out of
No one reads it. I mean, I see how
We have to.
To be honest, I don't need to necessarily see that as long as it's in the chat.
This looks like the command center back here.
Trying to make technology work.
Writing about them and that you were the reason.
I started out my day and did a few things. I got coffee, got in my car, drove straight to the Untitled Chapter office. So turned over, came here, and then tried my cards. Yeah, a lot of good things. This is the first thing.
You're so sweet.
Is it not about? Okay. This is our first spring meeting. You know, we have a very successful meeting in September, our annual meeting. A lot of great things that we wanted to kind of colonize the spring. So we started the spring meeting. We want to thank Paramount Advantage for helping us get this off the ground. This past year, as you may know, there was a bill in the legislature to repeal the need for credentials, so that essentially your employer couldn't use credentials as a means of employment. And, you know, this kind of encroachment into our practice happens every year by our legislature, one guys or another, but this one was really pretty existential. They would have basically said that the hospital could not use credentialing as a means of hiring or not hiring somebody. That gets into some scary territory. We defended MOC because we've done it well here. We've done it carefully. It has had good outcomes. We've learned a lot from it, and we were able to beat that back. American Board of Pediatrics offered to send us one of those leaders and has sent us Buzz this morning, and then Buzz Land is going to talk about how they're thinking about MOC as it evolves. But I think it's a really important topic. First of all, let me say that his name is Marshall Land, L-A-N-D. But I want to hear you about land to the slaughter in this particular picture. But let me just tell you a little bit about his background. He's a general pediatrician, practiced for 42 years. He's been a long-term member of the board of ABP, and you were the chair of the board of American Board of Pediatrics for a while. He's also a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He graduated from Dartmouth and the University of Cincinnati School of Medicine, one of our own, coming back to home base here. He has worked his entire career in Vermont. I don't know if you saw recently, but Vermont is considered the best place to be a child in the country. So that's really that's a real tribute to how hard they've worked and how many leaders we have in Vermont over the years. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about the maintenance certification process and how we're thinking about it. There are bathrooms across the hall. We're going to take a break afterwards. There's going to be a chance for questions either live on a microphone or you all have cards. Please fill those out and let's have a good conversation about the future of maintenance certification. But, thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks, Elizabeth, and for organizing all this and making emails back and forth. Appreciate the opportunity to join you today. This next one's for Chris, actually. I had one of the nice things about being here is that I've left snow and ice in Vermont, and I wanted to get a picture of that to show you, but I was in such a rush to get on the plane that I wasn't able to get one. But I did get this picture of my office. This one was taken last July. That's not true. Hope that's the only thing I say that's not true. So no real disclosures to make, except that, as Dr. Murray said, I'm like a lot of you, I'm a general pediatrician, a guy in the trenches. And I also have, like a lot of you, have this strong belief in lifelong learning and this strong belief that no matter how good the care is that we already give, that we could do even better for our patients. We can keep working to improve and be even better. And that's what ongoing certification, or MLC, is supposed to be all about. But when I grumbled a little bit and said, well, I really believe in this, but I wasn't as fond of the process of MLC. Well, if you complain enough, then you can get yourself some work. So I am working hard with the board to try to make changes to make it more relevant, more meaningful, easier to do. But I do believe strongly in it. So I want to, well, first I want to say, when I talked to Elizabeth ahead of time, I was trying to get from her what you might like to hear about. And we talked about different things and some questions, some thoughts, and I started daydreaming a bit. And actually, I did a video of my daydream, and here it is. Get up and dance. Come on, you just had lunch. It's time to move those bodies around. Dr. Murray, nutrition guy. Come on, Doc, get him going. So the idea is, why MLC? But before I really had this solid in my mind, I daydreamed a little bit more. Things became a little bit clearer to me. And this is what I saw in that video. I guess I better stop with that. But that did lead me to think about the objectives that I would like to talk with you about this morning into the early part of the afternoon. I want to give you just a little bit of the history of why we have this program, why we do it, fairly briefly. But what I really want to spend time on are two things. One is an overview of the recent improvements that I think improvements that the ABP has made in parts 2, 3, and 4. Talk just briefly about the fees, and then I hope there's an equal amount of time to listen for your ideas. I'm on the road to let you know what's happening at the board, but also to try to find ways in which we can continue to improve this and make it better. So why do I have to do this MLC? For most of us, our days are busy enough. Some of us start off in the hospital with some hospital rounds, seeing some babies. Others spend the whole day there. We spend time in our office. We're seeing a whole variety of problems going on in our office with different kids. We're on the phone. We're talking to parents, patients, colleagues, referral sources, insurers. We're trying to devote some time to make some community contributions. And then, we really would like to spend a little bit of time of that day with the thing that's most important to us, and that's our families. So how do we justify this MLC business? Well, this, first of all, the certification program goes back to 1933, when the AAP decided that there ought to be an independent organization that could certify that people taking care of children were trained based on standards of excellence to lead to high quality of care. Until that time, all you needed to do to be a pediatrician was to write pediatrician on a card and tack that up on your door, and that was all that it took. And the AAP said there ought to be some other standard setting. And so that together with the AMA and the American Pediatric Society, they formed the ABP as an independent organization. And the first exams were given in 1934. Those were written essays and oral exams, and that meant permanent certification at the time. You've proven yourself in your training, you can now go out and legitimately hang up that sign. But what's happened? That certification process has evolved. 50 years later, almost all boards decided that we ought to be reassessing people to make sure that they still are meeting those standards. And then over the last 15, 20 years, there have been additional changes in terms of four-part program, point systems, and on to what we're going to talk about today, some with MOCA-Ps. We'll talk about that. So why these changes? I mean, MOC has been, it's a bit of a hassle enough, and I just sort of finally got it figured out looking at that website, and now you're telling me that it's got to change. Why in the world are we doing these things? Well, two reasons. Number one is the explosion of knowledge that's taking place. Just in this grainy graph, just as some indication, if you look back to when I trained in the 1970s, there were about 200,000 medical articles per year published in America. They weren't all good, but it's an indication of how much new knowledge was coming out. And today there's over 1 million per year. And in our own journal, that is the pediatrics, the AAP journal, there now are 1,000 more articles per year being submitted than just 7 years ago. One reason is this explosion of knowledge. The other is the recognition of medical errors. So in around the year 2000, the Institute of Medicine, now called the National Academy of Medicine, had two publications, To Err as Human and Crossing the Quality Chasm. And among other things in those publications, it was pointed out that that medical errors led to over 100,000 deaths per year in the United States. That number is now over 400,000 estimated. Hospitalized children have a medical error rate of 2 to 3 per 100 discharges. There's a 25% incidence of medication errors. This is in outpatient as well as inpatient. This involves prescribing, dispensing, administrating these medications. So the board certification has evolved. It evolved from a single test of knowledge that in an early point in one's career to a periodic test of knowledge, and now to a more continuous measure of knowledge acquisition and quality improvement. So MOC is about staying current, but it's about more than that. It's about also attempting to improve the care we're giving. And I'll say this a few more times as well, even though that care is already at a high level. So we're now into this four-part MOC. And I think you're familiar with these. Very quickly, part one is a pretty low bar right now. You have to have a license and not be in jail. So,
or not have been in jail.
And I think there's only 2 of you in this room that no, I won't give any names. And then what we're going to talk about are those other parts, those parts that do take some of your time, some effort in order to accomplish. The board isn't trying to leave you out there hanging to dry. By the way, this is Rick. Thanks, your family passed this picture on you. I understand this is a pretty common experience in your life growing up. So let's get started now. Let's talk about part 2 first of all, lifelong learning and self-assessment. And I'm going to start each of these parts by telling you in abbreviated form and leaving out some of the colorful words, some of the main complaints that come into the board about each of these parts. I already keep up. Why can't CME count for part 2? I'm already doing this stuff. So what's new? Well, MLC points can now be obtained for CME activities. Beginning in January of 17, and we do it here, beginning in January of 2017, the board worked together with the Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education so that points for CME activities could be obtained, could obtain MLC points as well. You just need to make sure that the assessment criteria that ACCME has is followed. AP chapter meetings like this one. You can get MLC credit, grant round. You really should be able to get, most people should be able to get all the Part 2 points that you need from activities that you already were doing in the past to get CME for. Grant round, AP chapter meetings, a meeting that you might, a prep meeting that you might go to, and so on. Has this been utilized? Well, in the first 6 months, that was first 6 months of 2017, there were almost 500 Part 2 activities that were registered, and that number is well over 2,300 now. There were over 30,000 MLC points awarded, and that's well over 100,000 now. So people have been making use of that. What else has been going on in Part 2? That's the key, getting points for things you're already doing. The board continues to have new when I say board, I apologize if that's rude. I'm used to saying it about the AVP, so I'm not to take away from your own board here. But the AVP has some new self-assessments based on activities that people have requested to get information on, learning tools on. So professionalism in global health, care of a transgender child, immigration, healthcare, updating patient safety, and the basics of QI. Also been enhancements made to question of the week. Anybody here do question of the week? Any of those hands that are up like it? Nah, his hands went very high. You love that, right? Well, it's a fun activity. You get this once a week. It's free. It's not free, or you paid for it with your registration to the AVP, but there's no additional fee for this. You get something once a week. You get a question. You take as much time as you want to answer it. You answer it. You then get an article which gives us some rationale and a description of that topic. And you answer it again, and that's the one that you get credit for. You can get both CME and MLC credit for that. Here are some recent ones, just to give you an idea of the kinds of questions that come up each week. How good is the power of suggestion to manage a child with functional abdominal pain? You could ask Dr. Murray that one. Should we use or not use ibuprofen post-tonsillectomy? What's the best way to fight off a recurrent case of the runs after a bout of C. diff? So, most cases, people call these practical bits of information. Okay, how about Part 3, the test? The test is the area that the board has spent most time on in the past couple of years in trying to change. Complaints came in. This exam every 10 years is not a learning experience. It's a waste of my time. And I hate the testing center. Anybody here hate the testing centers? Yeah. I mean, I went in, I had a cold. We actually get colds in Vermont. And I had a cold, and they said, anything in your pockets? I said, yeah, I've got a handkerchief. They said, we can't take that in, so you've got to use our Kleenex. So I took a couple of Kleenex, and they said, oh, no, take one Kleenex. And then you come back and you need another. So I hope that none of you followed me on that event. But in any event, so what's new? What is the AVP trying to do to help you? So there's a new program. It's called the MOCA-PEDS. And that stands for Maintenance and Certification Assessment for Pediatrics. This is a new tool that is an assessment for learning as well as a summative exam. And it's modeled after a program that the anesthesiology board had, which was called MOCA Minute. And MOCA Minute, the anesthesiology diplomats get a question once a week. They have 1 minute to answer it. It's an ongoing process. And that was initially set up as an exercise for their Part 2, but it now counts as their test. They, by the way, are modifying that more similarly to what we're doing and what you're going to hear about that we're doing in pediatrics. And almost all boards are now looking to the AVP for this model. So, okay, here's my video camera again. So I go into one of these testing centers. I want to see, was I the only guy that had a hard time? Let's see what happened. So here's a couple of responses from some of the people. That wasn't going to go over. So this is an overview of what MOCA-PEDS is all about. First of all, it's a continuous assessment tool. In the pilot years, there are 20 questions quarterly, and there's flexibility in answering these so that you could answer them all at once. I was talking to a person in Mississippi, the president of the Mississippi chapter, who said that she did all these during her lunch hour, one lunch hour. But other people, you can answer them one at a time, one week, a couple the next week. You have that option. They're delivered via the web to your laptop or mobile device in your home or office. It focuses on learning as well as an assessment of knowledge, and they're designed to fulfill the Part 3 requirements. The questions are intended to be an application of knowledge of everyday pediatrics, something that you carry around in your mind or your pocket. You get a short clinical vignette that try to mimic real-world situations. Multiple choice, single best answer. That's at least still the current question type. I think that we'll evolve from that. You get 5 minutes per question. Take all the time you want, prepping, get ready for this thing. But once you click the question and look at the question, you get 5 minutes. You can use resources. You can use any resources that you like, currently other than another human being. And you get instant feedback. So you answer the question and you immediately get a clinical rationale for what the board, what the AVP thought was the right answer, and why they thought that was right, and why they think the other answers weren't so good. And you do get references as well, in case you want to look at that further. So this was piloted, this was pre-piloted in 2016, it's piloted in 2017 and 2018. Over 11,000, almost 12,000 people have been involved in this. The idea was to get as much information as possible to make this something that if people didn't like it, at least they appreciated it as a good model for assessment. For some of us, this is not how MOC came into being. It came from top down, and we got a lot of input from grassroots on how that might be helpful to us in our experiences, in our practices. So this is trying to get the bugs out ahead of time for people to be able to comment and say, this is what we don't like. There have been changes from 2017 to 2018. People in 2017, quite a number of people said that they would like to see not just core knowledge tested, but new knowledge on guidelines or articles. This model's after the OB board and a couple of the other boards, so that what will probably take place in 2019 when this goes live is that you'll get 15 questions on core knowledge per quarter instead of 20. And there will be between 0 and 8 questions per year on those guidelines or articles. And a couple of guidelines or articles will be passed out to you in the 1st of January, and not in that first quarter, but in one of the subsequent quarters, you might get somewhere between 0 and 8 questions on those. Yes, Chris?
But how are the questions vetted? Who comes up with the questions and all of that?
Sure. So the questions are you can submit questions. Anybody can submit questions. All those questions are looked at by the testing team. That's headed by a general pediatrician, Laura Brooks from Virginia, and other general pediatricians are on that. By the question writing committees. There are 4 of those. They take a look at all these questions. They go over them again and again. They go from one committee to the next to say, does this sound reasonable to you? They are looked at psychometrically by having gone through pre-testing by people to say, does this question cut the mustard? Do you think that this is fair? If anybody's ever in the Chapel Hill area, you can just go in there, let me know, and just get an idea of this process. It's actually a very, I think, healthy process. But again, people are able to submit questions. Not as many of those questions are taken as those that are written by the people in those committees. Some of the ideas from those questions are taken, but they're not always in the same format or with people who have had the same training to write those questions. So this goes live in 2019, as I said. The subspecialties will gradually come in over the next 4 years. You'll enter this at the start of the 5-year cycle during which your next exam due date falls. So for some people, that's not going to be exactly 10 years after your last exam. There will be a few people for whom that will actually be a little bit earlier than that 10-year time when you start entering this cycle. There will be more people than that who will actually, if you consider the break, but will fall further than the 10 years. So it may be 11 or 12 years from your last exam before you need to start this. The idea was to try to get everybody engaged in this and to try to get rid of this 10-year, 5-year confusion. Seems like 5 and 10 ought to be pretty easy, but somehow it's confusing to almost everybody. You got your 5-year cycle, you get a notice with your 10-year exam, your 5-year cycle. So this will all be coordinated now. This is when the subspecialties will roll out. So how about participation during the pilot? The people that were eligible in 2017, people who were in 2016 in the pre-pilot, a notice was sent to every diplomate, whenever it was, the 1st of January or something, for who would like to enroll in the pre-pilot to be part of this. And within 24 hours, there were 2,000 people that had offered to take part in this. And something like 2,400 were involved in the pre-pilot stage. Then in the pilot stage in 2017, those who were due for their exam could elect to participate in this, or they could go ahead and take the proctored exam. So about 75% chose to do the MOCA PEDS, and in 2018, about 80% decided to do that. Subspecialists who were keeping up on their general PEDS exams, of those who were keeping up on that, they're not required to do that, by the way, but those who were keeping up on general PEDS as well as their subspecialty, over 80% registered to participate. So we've been able to have a lot of feedback in terms of how this works. And the feedback has brought in